Alrighty, g'day guys, just a super quick one here. So Kappa's released some data about the kingspells and their win rates and general like strength and all that, based on the results in FPG and Lil. So I thought I'd share that really quickly since it's pretty interesting, at least in my opinion. So FPG, Immolation has the most wins, 1847, 56% win rate. And these are with like 3,000, 3,200 odd games sample size. So it's a good sample size, right? Really solid sample size. So Immolation with a 56% win rate in FPG, and Thornmail with the lowest at 47%. So, it's pretty interesting. Wave is a bit above 50%, but actually Stomp has the lowest win rate in FPG, which is kind of crazy in my mind. Stomp is kind of hard to control with. I think like you see good KC use Stomp and it feels really good. I also feel like you need a bit more King with Stomp, like you need that regen at the end if you're King laking. And FPG, there are lumber charts as well, which maybe I'll find and tack on to the end of this, where, FPG has a bit less lumber in general inside of the game. So I feel like that might be part of the reason for this. I think part of the reason is KC skill. Part of the reason is a little less lumber in the game. Anyway, so we can have a look at some comparisons as well in FPG. So Immo versus Thorn. Immolation's got a 59% win rate. And Immolation versus Stomp. Immolation, 60% win rate. So yeah, once again, it's that Stomp low win rate. Thorn's got a 44% win rate versus Shockwave. Thornmail beats War Stomp though. Wow, Thornmail beats War Stomp. And here, Stomp gets absolutely shit on by Shockwave. It's like a 10% swing. So what's the closest one in FPG? The closest two spells are Thornmail and War Stomp, according to this. Wow. Really interesting. Okay, so obviously feel free to have a read of that. But once again, the good sample size of games. So now we move over to Lil. And that'll make it a bit easier to see. Sorry, I probably should have done that the whole time. Anyway, in Lil. So Immolation, again, the highest win rate, 56%. So it's like 0.8% worse in Lil, which is, considering half the sample size, it's like whatever. Thornmail 47% compared to 46%, so that's kind of similar. It's interesting to see that Wave and Stomp are both 48%, whereas here Wave is 50% and Stomp is 45%. So these two are like far more even in Lil than in FPG, based on the sample size. Or based on the sample. Alright, so having a look at the comparison, Immo vs Thorn, 50% or 56% win rate for Immolation, 59%. So Thorn's got a bit more of a fighting chance. Immo vs Shockwave, maybe that's just when I'm calling though. When I'm calling with Immolation, Thorn has a fighting chance. Alright, Immolation versus Shockwave. Immolation wins 60% of the time, well, 59% of the time, which is 2% more, and it's the biggest difference here actually, which is really interesting. Immolation wins. So according to this is really interesting to think about. Immolation, Immo vs Thorn is actually the fairest matchup for Immo versus non-Immo. So Thorn is actually the best spell into Immolation. It's interesting. Part of the reason I imagine would be you have Thornmail, you know it sucks 7. Maybe you send a bit less on 7 and get less punished by Immolation. Maybe. Or maybe it's randomness in the sample. Certainly feels worse to get fucked by Immo versus Thorn. But Thorn Shockwave. So here, Thorn Shockwave, 44% win rate for Thorn. Here we've got 46% win rate. Okay. Thorn Stomp. Here, Thorn is actually winning with 51. Here it's losing with 49. But this is like the really big difference. Stomp Wave, 44% Stomp, 55% Wave in FPG, or 56% Wave in FPG. Here we've got 51% Stomp, 49% Wave. So this is actually not even the closest. The closest is actually Thornmail War Stomp. Yeah, okay. So the closest spell matchup is Thornmail War Stomp. That makes sense. I think most people would say that they are the two worst spells. I mean, my favorite generally is like if you get MO, you tend to feel pretty good, and then I really like Wave personally, playing with it. But you know, different people like different things. But yeah, Stomp Wave really quite comparable in Lil as opposed to like hugely advantaged for Wave in FPJ. I just thought that was really interesting. Anyway, so you know, just nice and quick, but if you have any questions about that, feel free to ask. Yeah, like, subscribe, all of that, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers. Alrighty. G'day, guys. So, I mentioned it in the kingspell stats, but here we have the lumber stats. So what this tells you is, on the end of level 1, FBG on average has 154.8 lumber. I believe that's lumber harvested. Obviously doesn't include the starting lumber between the team as a whole. And Lil has 155.2, right? 30 or 29,000 points for FPG, 15,000 for Lil. You know, there's about double the amount of FPG games going on, which is pretty fair. So Lil has 0.4 lumber, more lumber on average at the end of level 1. Cool. So I guess that just tells you that like one more person likes to start 3-0 a bit more often, because the 1-0 starts are more or less always going to be the same, I think. This much lumber could also just be in terms of who's pushing quickly and who's sitting on gold when they shouldn't be. Alright, round 2, we'll just go through like a couple of these. So you see round 2 and 3, there's like plus 1.6, plus 3.4. There's like not that much difference. But then we get to level 4, and at the end of level 4, right, all players on average have 14 more lumber. End of level 5, 27 more lumber. So here we're getting like 10 more lumber, and then another like plus 10 again, right? So it's interesting. A couple of ways to think about this. Firstly, it's like Lil in general, a little more experienced. Feels like they can push more on, you know, for level 4, level 5, if they understand the builds a bit better or understand any mixes a bit better. But it also probably just speaks to a matter. This is not particularly current, and I believe at the time level 3 was like a pretty damn popular send in Lil. So you'd see the pushes, so you know, you'd be able to push after a level 3 send relatively often, right? And maybe in FPG at the time, I don't know, but maybe they had somewhat of an internal meta where like 4-5 was more common, so people were staying a little bit lower at that sort of time, which is interesting. Any other reason it could be for? The only other thing you'd say is that the YOLOs are more willing, perhaps, than Lil to actually like leak to send and give up their lane a bit to have the push if they're not trying to carry. Could be something there as well. So little difference on 8, and then you can see level 9, it actually drops down again. So this means that around like level 9, level 10, people in Lil are actually pushing a little bit less, right? Because we had a 44 lumber difference, but now it goes down to a 30 lumber difference, right? So people in Lil are pushing a little bit less around level 9, level 10. I can say that in Lil it's pretty common to see like double 7-2 and like double push to actually get the 10 holds off, because 10 is such a key level, and if you actually go mid on 10, if you get 2 people mid on 10, if they've got like good rolls, it can feel pretty hard to lose the game at that point, assuming it's not fat enough for a skip 15 angle. So that might be part of that. Just interesting. Anyway, we can see level 11, 12, 13, it just picks up a bit more, up to 14, and then it drops again. So all this means is that FPJ 14 is more common than Lil over the sample size, which makes sense. The games, people overbuild a little bit more in FPG, straights end a little bit more, like the 4-5 straights ends, means the games are a little less fat, just, you know, on average, right? Games a little less fat, easier to end on 14, right? And also, you know, if people are misexecuting their builds a little bit, it's easier to kill on 14. So that makes sense. And then you can see 15, the lumber difference drops. It's because if both teams are surviving 14, then they're pushing. And getting more lumber, little 15 more common, not pushing before 15. You can see it jumps right back up here where Lil gets to push after 15. Jumps up there again, really jumps up after 17. So what this says is at the end of, so people in Lil, 100 would jump. It's interesting. I guess that just means the 17 cents are a little more common in Lil actually. And people are pushing after that 17 cent, and that's where this lumber comes from. Okay. So maybe FPG is like 14.20. It's more common sort of thing. I'm not sure. Yeah, with the 14, there's no resend on 17. And you can see as we get to like the end of the levels, there's way less sample size, right? Like 200 and 150 games. It stops meaning very much here. But you can see around 21, 22, people in the are more inclined to push. And then it just picks up at a somewhat even pace, and then it jumps really hard on 29, but I feel like that's probably a sample size thing. Games in Lil going 29, probably fatter overall. People have more value, more wood. If it's not ending 28. Because I don't really think people are like pushing super hard after 27. Could be wrong, of course, but yeah, that is what it is. It's actually level 28 I'm talking about. Pardon, I'm getting confused because this is the XL number and this is the actual level. But yeah, so hopefully that's sort of interesting for you guys. I'll zoom out a bit if you want to like screenshot the whole thing or whatever to have a look at later. But yeah, I think it's pretty cool. Anyway, cheers very much for watching, guys. Appreciate it. Like, subscribe, all of that, and I'll catch you in the next one. Cheers.